that kind of activities, we should be very close well connected with the financial institutions and others. To this part should be kept as a long-term investment, and then the regardless the political changes and others. Of course, the other part, we understand the investors and others can and be can be influenced or could be influenced very much. Then the depending on such kind of issues, but still the fundamental and basic layers of the technology side should be and the private sector of that kind of engaged in such business. We should be very consistent and make our best efforts of the continued innovations.
Consistency and long-term vision. That's what you're saying, and implementation, of course. And I'm so glad, ladies and gentlemen, we are now joined by the minister from India, Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri. Minister is the Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas and also Minister of Housing and Urban Affairs from his country. Thank you so much, sir. Fighting all the morning traffic to get here. We really appreciate that. Earlier, we are all expecting your perspective coming from an emerging economy, a fast-growing economy, your understanding of the topic today, please.
No, let me start by saying that the changes that are taking place in the world, we are facing multiple crises. And for a country like India, which now has, I think, the largest population in the world, it requires a transition to sustainability without in any way jeopardizing or undermining the need to deliver basic welfare to a large and growing population. Now, let me set the context, do some context setting on where we are just now. We are close to a $4 trillion economy, but with a lot of developmental challenges. That involves, and you referred to it as a fast growing, I've also heard the word fastest growing. Well, we are currently, I think the last 3 quarters, our rate of growth was upwards of 7.2, 7.3%. If you look at the 2 portfolios that I have the privilege of dealing with, let me start with petroleum and natural gas. If you look at the global scenario today, India's consumption is growing at 3 times the global average. In the next 20 years or so, India will account for 25% of the energy demand of the world globally, one country. If you look at the Housing and Urban Affairs Ministry that I'm also associated with, we are, and I'm not citing a figure which I have come up with, it's a McKinsey study of a few years ago. India is currently in the position of building between 700 and 900 million square meters of urban space every year, which is the equivalent of a Chicago. Now, given these broad pointers, today, I think what happens in India is also important for the rest of the world. I mean, I was at Davos, I think it was 2 years ago, when the Russia-Ukraine military factor was very much in everybody's mind. I said then, and I say that now, that all these new challenges that we have to face them pragmatically. And I say this not to provoke anyone, but to just mention, if India had chosen at that point of time not to be pragmatic, we would have had a situation where oil would have gone beyond $200. Why? Because then India cannot stop. We import 85% of our crude. And we have to deal with issues of availability, affordability, and sustainability. if India had allowed itself to be put into a situation where we were to draw on the same resources. But other parts of the world did not take the kind of position we took. We are acutely conscious of that. And as a result of which, if you look at the LNG market, I mean, you can quantify what the cost has been to them. But today, for us in India, I think it's paramount that we achieve all this, which I mean availability. There's never been any difficulty on that. Affordability, yes, I think we are one of the few countries, Miyanaga-san would perhaps know that. I think Japan is another country where oil prices in the last 2 years at the bunk have actually declined. In India, the cost of petrol over the 2 years. Why? Because we've had to forego central government revenue. Because at the same time, whilst we were feeding 800 million people 3 meals of dry ration in a day, something which we are continuing for 5 years. So I would say that in these new challenges which arise and how we face them, there is a very strong listing, but there is also a global commitment. We have not allowed our domestic preoccupations to in any way undermine or dilute our commitment to sustainability. That's brought out in biofuels. We are making rapid progress in what we are doing for green hydrogen, etc.
Okay. I see a key word that you just mentioned, Mr. Minister, which is pragmatism. How is that articulated and also interpreted, Madam Commissioner, from your side?
Well, I just want to comment that India held last year the presidency of G20, and it was very strongly, well, so that India presented this pragmatic approach. From European Union point of view, we did our utmost to avoid implications that will put the rest of the world in very bad position, despite the fact that gas crisis was artificially created by Russia. This was not a result of sanctions, but it was unilateral decision made by Russia to cut gas supplies to European companies, despite the fact that they had long-term contracts. And as a result, yes, European companies had to find some alternatives, and LNG was a solid alternative. But we knew that we cannot cover all the lost volumes from Russia with LNG, because otherwise it would have created huge deficit. And that's why we promoted fuel switch. Where it was possible, we replaced gas with renewables. And just listening now that the demand in India will grow so fast, the cheaper alternatives to cover this demand are always homegrown renewables, just not to be so dependent on imports. That what we did 2 years ago was first year in Europe where we produced more electricity from wind and solar than from gas. And last year, 2023, was even better. We do have very ambitious plans for our offshore wind. And that means that we have to promote all the actions to expand our grids. And I think that this is one sector where we can share our knowledge, how to interconnect different markets and how to use the existing grids in maximum. And this is something that we are doing also. We do have these special partnerships. We call them just energy transition partnerships, where we help countries across the globe who are very dependent on coal right now. To opt for cleaner alternatives. So we are very pragmatic. We do understand that even if Europe is climate neutral, this is not enough. We need to find partners, and we are willing to share our knowledge and our technology.
As we all know, Professor, it is really not about political correctness, but really it is about making all the economies benefiting from the latest discussion that we're having. But here comes an interesting issue. Raw material is an important one. Yes. Our business leader just mentioned. For example, let's just say a country in Africa. on its way to prosperity, but facing many challenges. But there are also a lot of developing economies in Africa that are doing very well. But what I'm just saying is an abstract example, not to mention anybody's name. It has the best raw materials for some of the renewable energies that we need in the world. We see this tremendous competition looking for these raw materials. But at the same time, people are also concerned whether the old story will be repeated again, that the raw materials will be out of that country for exports at a price, sounds reasonable, but still that country will continue to be poor, which we saw decades already happening. So are we really doing things to make sure those stories are not repeated? If you look at our audience today, they're coming from everywhere. Maybe they have their own stories to tell later in our Q&A session. But this is one of those things in people's mind. We really need to address this. Professor, your thoughts on this?
Sure. I think you're addressing a number of things in the abstract example
in the anecdote story,
right? Which could be, could be conceived as you're talking about the Congo and cobalt, or there are places that really are very dominant right now in the clean energy supply chain. And I would say there's a couple of concerns here. One is on the side of the countries looking to secure those materials in terms of what is required there. And the commissioner mentioned that it's just sensible, pragmatic, strategic, not to be overly reliant on one player in the market, not just for the production of these raw materials, but for the processing as well. And that's where the supply chain actually gets very, very constricted, is because so many of these minerals are actually processed in China. So they may be produced around the world, but they're processed in one country. And that creates bottlenecks, potentially geopolitically or for natural disasters or for any types of reasons. So I think on the one hand, from the perspective of the consumer, there's the need to diversify the suppliers. From the perspective of the producer, the Congo or another country that may have this, there is, I would say, an imperative to see that this race to secure these raw materials leads to broader based development and doesn't recreate what has been known as the resource curse in a lot of other countries that have been able to develop and export oil that has come with a certain number of development challenges. And here, I'd say we still have a long way to go to make sure that the investments going into these raw material productions are ones which can be broad-based. And I think there's a role to develop international standards here so that you can have agreements among countries, and there are efforts in progress where there can be an agreement. If you uphold these standards in terms of labor and other factors, then you'll have access to concessional financing.
Pragmatism is also what I heard from Mr. Minister. Of course, what you have said is a beautiful picture. And yet, sometimes we know beautiful pictures might not function at any time. So do we wait for the beautiful picture to be drawn up before we act? Or we will go with the imperfect picture, but work on issues to avoid repeating of the old story? Mr. Minister.
Madam Moderator, I think what the professor said initially is that you combined a large number of issues and you compressed them into the question that you put to her. If you are talking about access to raw materials, well, the materials you're dealing with today are strategic minerals or whatever. That may have a slightly different thing, but this whole process of accessing raw materials has been going on for centuries. And I, as a student of history, I mean, you can look at it. What is different now? There are fundamental differences. I think what we have to take into account is today, and I speak from my Indian experience, there are literally millions of people in different parts of the world who require access to clean energy. I'll give you one of our schemes, which is the Ujjwala scheme, which involves providing liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, to economically weaker sections of our population. And we've already handed out about 110 million of those connections. and that the gas that is supplied there for cooking purposes, otherwise they are using firewood, coal, and all this. So if you have to wean them away, and we subsidize it marginally at the point of, it's a consumer's a subsidy. We have also taken electricity to every household, clean drinking water to every household. I think there are large parts of the world. Now, if you're talking about extractive industries in parts on large continents where they are rich in terms of minerals, yes, I think we have to ensure that the benefits of that also go down to their population. The professor was mentioning standards. I mean, those have been discussed. I've been a diplomat professional 39 years. So we've discussed labor standards, we've discussed other issues. Clearly, that didn't go far enough. It didn't go far enough. And so many attempts have been made because people mouth those platitudes, if I may, but we don't act. Now, what do we need to do? I think fundamentally to bring people in, if you're talking about Africa, I don't have no intention of Africa, large parts of Latin America and other parts of the world, we need to take those benefits of development to those people.
Well said, Mr. Miyanaga.
Yes. I think for raw material, and it is very crucial, and I think it will take to complete the full process of new development of the raw materials from extractions and the refinings and smelting and the selection and smelting and the product manufacturing, and then all such investment will become very big, will be very big, and it takes very long. And investment recovery, yes, and also the most advanced technology should be applied to the I think the new investment, and then I think there will be a lot of, but at the same time, we do hope such kind of technology will be supported by the new energies and green energies and less carbon dioxide emission technologies and so on. And then such kind of overall investment will be secured through some international scheme. That will be very important, because I think without that kind of security, we cannot devote ourselves to such kind of improvement on development and supply the equipment. And I think probably in the pretty near future, I do hope personally and as a management of business, private sector, yes, there will be such kind of another scheme, international scheme to secure that kind of the raw material development in the other countries, and hopefully in developing and emerging countries. It will help their growth.
Thank you very much. I think we have very limited for questions time, but I do want to invite expertise coming from the audience. Maybe we quickly have 2 questions no time. Oh, okay. Sorry, everyone. Well, thank you so much, all the panelists, for your wonderful input coming from different perspectives. I'm sure discussion like this will continue, and it's very important that we are all involved in such discussions. Appreciate it. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam.